When Daniel Brooks failed the police academy fitness test, he didn't tell anyone. Not his friends, not his family, not even the people who had cheered him on. He just drove home, parked in front of his small house in Dayton, Ohio, and sat in the car for 20 minutes with the engine off. At 28, Daniel had built his entire identity around one dream: becoming a police officer. He wasn't chasing status or power. He wanted to serve. He wanted to protect. More than anything, he wanted to prove to himself that he was capable of real discipline and responsibility. But that one failure felt like the end of the story, or at least, that's what he thought. Daniel grew up watching his father, a man who left for work before the sun was up and came home exhausted. His dad wasn't famous or wealthy, but he was respected. Neighbors waved. People trusted him. Daniel craved that kind of life, one built on quiet pride and earned respect. After high school, he drifted through warehouse jobs, security shifts, and late nights, but the dream never faded. He trained whenever he could, squeezing in push-ups in his living room, running around the block after a long shift, always believing that sheer effort would be enough to get him there. But on test day, his nerves got the best of him. His breathing collapsed. His legs gave out way too early. When the instructor shook his head and marked fail on the clipboard, Daniel felt smaller than he ever had in his life. The failure wasn't just about fitness. It felt deeply personal, like a judgment on his character. The months that followed were silent. Daniel stopped talking about his goals. When people asked, he'd just say he was figuring things out, but inside, he felt like he was drowning. He kept his warehouse job, but now every box he lifted felt heavier, a constant reminder of the uniform he wasn't wearing. Every night, he'd lie in bed replaying the exact moment he failed. The instructor's disappointed expression burned into his memory. He started avoiding mirrors, avoiding conversations about the future, and most of all, avoiding any sense of hope. The hardest part wasn't the embarrassment. It was the creeping fear that the failure was telling him the truth, that he simply wasn't good enough, that maybe this was all he was ever meant to be. He sank deeper into this quiet despair, convinced his story was over. But then, one night, something shifted. Exhausted after a double shift, Daniel was half watching late-night television. An interview came on with an older firefighter, a veteran of the service, talking about his long career. The man said something that cut through the noise and stopped Daniel cold. He said, "Respect isn't given because you succeed. It's given because you keep showing up after you fail." Daniel grabbed the remote and muted the TV, the silence in the room suddenly feeling profound. He realized something uncomfortable, something that didn't feel good but felt deeply honest. He hadn't failed because he lacked potential. He had failed because he quit on himself the moment it hurt. He let one single moment of weakness define his entire worth. That honesty was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was also the first real step forward he'd taken in months. There was no grand announcement, no motivational posts on social media. Instead, Daniel made a quiet, unseen decision. He made a promise to himself, and only to himself: "I will become stronger whether anyone notices or not." The journey began not with a bang, but with the quiet alarm of his phone at 5 a.m. He started waking up early, not to punish himself for his past failure, but to rebuild himself for the future. He trained smarter this time. He researched proper breathing techniques, focused on endurance instead of just ego lifting, and learned about nutrition. He fixed his sleep schedule. One by one, he cut out the excuses that had held him back. Some mornings were brutal. Some days, he was filled with doubt, wondering if any of it even mattered. But he kept showing up. He kept his promise. Slowly, day by day, he was forging a new version of himself in the quiet darkness before dawn. And as Daniel changed internally, something unexpected began to happen externally. People started to notice, not his growing muscles, but his mindset. At his warehouse job, he started volunteering for more responsibility. He stayed calm when things got stressful. He started helping his coworkers without being asked, offering a hand when someone was struggling. His supervisors began to trust him with bigger tasks. His coworkers started leaning on him for support. He wasn't wearing a police uniform, but he was becoming the man he had always imagined wearing one. Dependable, calm, and respected. That realization changed everything for him. The uniform wasn't the goal, the man he became was. A year after his first attempt, Daniel applied again. This time was different. He didn't walk in with desperation, but with a quiet confidence. During the fitness test, he didn't rush. He didn't panic. He wasn't competing with the person next to him. He was only competing with the man he was yesterday. He focused on his breathing, on his form, on the promise he had made to himself. When the test finally ended, he walked off the track feeling peaceful, regardless of the outcome. He had already won the real battle. 2 days later, an email arrived in his inbox. The subject line was simple, but it made his heart stop. He opened it. The first word he saw was passed. Daniel didn't jump for joy or shout. He just sat down in his chair, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. He wasn't celebrating because he had won. He was grateful because he knew, deep in his bones, that he had earned it. Daniel did eventually become a police officer, and he serves his community with the quiet pride he always admired in his father. But he'll be the first to tell you that the uniform wasn't the biggest victory. The real win happened much earlier, in those silent months of rebuilding, in the quiet decision to stop letting a single failure define him. He learned a profound truth that most of us miss. Success doesn't make you strong. The process of rebuilding after you fall is what forges your strength. Today, Daniel mentors young recruits at the academy. And whenever he sees someone fail a test, when he sees that familiar look of shame and despair in their eyes, he pulls them aside. He tells them his story, and he always ends with the same words: "This moment does not decide who you are. What you do next does." So, if you're listening to this and you've failed at something you cared deeply about, if the embarrassment has made you want to shrink and disappear, if you're questioning your own worth right now, I want you to hear this loud and clear. Failure is not a final verdict on your life. It is simply feedback. And if you can find the courage to respond to that feedback with discipline, humility, and patience, you will discover that failure can become your greatest teacher and your greatest strength. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one.